full authority to scare the hell of the American public. They've done that. Trump stands there every day like a deer in a headlight, a 24/7, death watch, which is essentially what CNN is. This is not the Black Plague ripping through the entire population, taking people down, whether they're old, young, in between, healthy or not.
It's David Stockman of David Stockman Contra Corner, and he's had a lot of experience. I'm not going to name all those, but he had a lot of experience with a president by the name of Ronald Reagan. He was the budget director, and that's, I don't know, David always knew how to crunch the numbers up. I think that's where he really did the crunching. David, welcome to our program today.
Glad to be with you. There's a lot to talk about here, and frankly, some numbers crunching that gets to the truth of this whole hysteria about COVID-19. It couldn't be more timely. We have a campaign being run by the mainstream media. I call it the Homo Brothers CNN, Inquisition, that is really scaring the daylights out of both politicians and the broad public in a way that's leading us to commit damn near economic suicide. Shut down nation is a government-imposed calamity that is getting, more vicious by the day. We saw last week the unemployment claims again, 5 million. In 4 weeks, we're up to 22 million new unemployment claims, and it's predicated on a description or characterization of the COVID-19 that I think is ass backwards, if you'll excuse my French. This is not the Black Plague ripping through the entire population, taking people down, whether they're old, young, in between, healthy or not. This is just the opposite. This is a very bad, contagious flu variant that strikes in a pinpointed way at the elderly, and especially the elderly that have pre-existing life-threatening conditions like heart disease or various other comorbidities, as they call them, diabetes, even cancer, respiratory illnesses, and so forth. And I think it's important before, this continues much longer, and they're running this campaign on the media. You can't open it up. You've got to wait. We're going to, be sheltered in until 2022. An obvious thing is we have to identify, isolate, treat, help that small subpopulation, maybe 10% of the population or even less, that's vulnerable to this thing. And on the other hand, open up society and economy and let the rest of the population get back to work and back to life.
David, Daniel has a question for you.
Yeah, you do make the good point, David, in your piece that there are virtually no New York deaths among the disease-free population under the age of 50. And these are predominantly the people that are out there or would be out there working. And that's so important. And you point out one size does not fit all. There should be special care taken for those that are vulnerable. But when you shut the people who have virtually no chance of dying from this away with those that do, it makes no sense. We talked about this recently. Thomas Massey, Republican of Kentucky, said, we are facing severe disruptions in our food chains. We hear that Smithfield is closing plants. Farmers are dumping milk. Vegetables are rotting. And we're facing a massive catastrophe because of this monumental power grab by politicians.
Yeah, unfortunately, as in so many other cases, Donald Trump has gotten some very bad advice from career government bureaucrats who have tunnel vision. Now, I'm not a Dr. Fauci lover. In fact, I think he ought to be, I think Trump ought to do his thing and fire him forthwith. But let's just understand who he is. He graduated from Cornell Medical School in 1966. Ron, he's almost, I think, up with you. But in any event, 2 years later, he became a researcher at the NIH, National Health Institute of Health, for allergy and infectious disease. He's been there for 52 years in the same tunnel, and he's been director of the joint since 1984. Now, he may know a lot about infectious disease, but he knows very little about the rest of the world, and he was asked the wrong question. He should have been asked, who are the most vulnerable populations? It's not one size fits all. This isn't the Grim Reaper of 1335, Black Death in England or in Europe. And how do we identify them? How do we protect them? But instead, these knuckleheads in the Trump White House, gave them a platform to say, shut it down. And they gave the CDC a platform to say, we can stop this virus if we stop social and economic life. That was the wrong question. There have been a lot of these viruses studied, SARS, MERS, H1N1. There's a whole body of literature that tells you very clearly you can't stop the virus. What you need to do is mitigate the harm to the most vulnerable populations that can happen. Well, they weren't given that. They were given full authority to scare the hell of the American public. They've done that. Trump stands there every day like a deer in a headlight while they're talking, and then he goes into another, pissing contest, literally, with the rest of the press. And what it's done, unfortunately, is opened up a window for all of the partisan Democratic governors and mayors of the country to go whole hog with lockdown, shut their economies down, demand Washington bail out everybody as a consequence of the shutdown, and blame the whole damn thing on Republicans and Donald Trump. If you would have tried to do something as stupid as this whole scenario that I've just described, it would be hard to come up with it. It's underway. The CNN and the other mainstream media are desperate for advertising revenue. Their ratings are terrible. The public doesn't believe them anymore. And Trump is right about that. They're losing their audience. So now if you can run a 24/7 death watch, which is essentially what CNN is. They got that little crawler on the bottom of the screen there that is updated by the hour. I think it's a morbid, kind of thing. But apparently that's how they're selling advertising, and that's what I think their motivation is.
We're hoping that the people are waking up to some degree from our viewpoint.
Yes, that's a good point, and I certainly, you see signs of it. Yesterday in Michigan, there were protesters outside the state capitol, and of course, last night CNN had the governor on saying that these people are bioterrorists. That's about as crazy. They're exercising their constitutional rights, and suddenly they become bioterrorists. But I don't think that's the end of it. I think it's just the beginning when people realize, because all this information that we've been sharing here today, it's not secret. It's not something that I've got, in a safe here where I am in Greenwich, Connecticut. This stuff is going to get out, and people are going to realize that, we've shut down the entire society, locked down the economy for no good reason. And once this information starts to filter out, and we all have to work on getting it out to the public, I think there's going to be a real uprising.